Hello and welcome back to my blog. I think we're going to be accompanied by not only Snickers next door, but the ice cream man truck. So anyway, Tea Leaves by Francis S. Drake. It was at Boston, the ringleader in rebellion, that the issue was to be tried. It was then the most flourishing commercial town on the continent and contained a population of about 16,000, almost exclusively of English origin. Though there were no sidewalks in the town, and, except when driven aside by carts or carriages, everyone walked in the middle of the street, where the pavement was the smoothest, an English visitor had 20 years before pronounced it to be as large and better built than Bristol or any other city in England except London. The only land communication between Boston and the surrounding towns at that period was by way of the narrow neck at its southern extremity. Her inhabitants were industrious, frugal, and enterprising, and were equally distinguished for their pertinacity and independence. They were nearly all of the same church and were strict in the observance of Sunday. Though many had acquired a competence, few were very rich or very poor, and their style of living had little diversity. In her free schools, all were taught to read and write. A score of enterprising booksellers, among them Henry Knox, imported into the colony all the standard books on law, politics, history, and theology, while a free press and town meetings instructed her citizens in political affairs. Her mechanics, many of whom were shipbuilders, were active in all town meetings. Ever jealous of her rights, she had grown up in their habitual exercise and was early and strenuous in her opposition to the claims of parliamentary supremacy. Even her divines, many of whom were distinguished by their learning and eloquence, gave their sanction of religion to the cause of freedom. For these reasons, Boston was the fittest theater for the decisive settlement of the grave question at issue. Two men of very different metal were especially prominent in Boston at this time: Thomas Hutchinson, the royal governor, and Samuel Adams, the man of the people. Both were natives of the town and graduates of Harvard College. Hutchinson, during a public life of over 30 years, had held the office of representative, counselor, Chief Justice, and Lieutenant Governor. No man was so experienced in the affairs of the colony, no one so familiar with its history, usages, and laws. As a legislator and as a judge, he had manifested ability and impartiality. Unfortunately for his peace of mind and for his reputation, he set himself squarely against the popular movement. He advised altering the charters of the New England provinces, the dismemberment of Massachusetts, the establishment of a citadel in Boston, the stationing of a fleet in its harbor, the experiment of martial law, the transportation of incendiaries to England, and the prohibition of the New England fisheries, at the same time entreating of his correspondents in England to keep his opinions secret. For these errors of judgment, he paid dearly in the obloquy, O-B-L-O-Q-U-I, I'm going to have to look that up, obloquy heaped upon him by his countrymen, and his exile from his native land, in which he earnestly desired that his bones might be laid. The recent publication of his diary and letters shows that he not only acted honestly and conscientiously in opposing the popular current, but that he, at the same time, used his influence conscientiously in opposing the popular... Let me reread that. The recent publication of his diary and letters shows that he not only acted honestly and conscientiously in opposing the popular current, but that he, at the same time, used his influence to mitigate the severe measures of government. My apologies. He counseled them against the Stamp Act, against closing the port of Boston, and against some features of the Regulating Act as too harsh and impolitic. It was his sincere wish that his countrymen would admit the supremacy of Parliament, and he believed that such a result could be attained without bloodshed. He was courteously received in England, where his course was very generally approved, and offered a baronetcy, which, however, he declined on the score of the insufficiency of his estate. His judgment in American affairs, though often sought by the ministry, seems to have been seldom followed. Candor requires that in the light of his letters and diary, in which his real sentiments appear, the harsh judgment usually passed upon Hutchinson should be materially modified. His opponent, Samuel Adams, the great agitator, possessed precisely those qualities that the times required. His political creed was that the colonies and England had a common king, but separate and independent legislatures, and as early as the year 1769, he had been a zealous advocate of independence. He was the organizer of the Revolution through the committees of correspondence which he initiated, and was one of those who matured the plan of a general Congress. A genuine lover of liberty, he believed in the capacity of the Americans for self-government. It was Samuel Adams who, the day after the massacre of March 5, 1770, was chosen chairman of the committee to demand of the governor the immediate removal of the troops from the town of Boston. The stern and inflexible patriot clearly exposed the fallacy of Hutchinson's reply to the demand and compelled the governor to yield. No flattery could lull his vigilance, no sophistry deceive his penetration. Difficulties did not discourage, nor danger appall him. Though poor, he possessed a lofty and incorruptible spirit, and though grave and austere in manner, was warm in his feelings. His affable and persuasive address reconciled conflicting interests and promoted harmonious action. As a speaker, he was pure, concise, logical, and impressive, and the energy of his diction was not inferior to the depth of his mind. As a political writer, he was clear and convincing, and was the author of able state papers. No man had equal influence over the popular mind with Samuel Adams, who has been aptly styled the last of the Puritans. At Boston, where the feeling against receiving the tea was strongest, the consignees were, by a singular infelicity, either relatives of the hated governor or in sympathy with the odious administration. Two of them were his sons. Richard Clark was his nephew. One of Clark's daughters married Copley, the painter, and became the mother of Lord Lyndhurst, the future Lord Chancellor of England. Benjamin Faneuil and Joshua Winslow were respectable merchants. All but Faneuil were connected by marriage. They were well aware of the temper of the people and of the proceedings in Philadelphia and New York, and would doubtless have yielded to the popular demands but for Hutchinson. Public sentiment was stimulated against them by representing them as crown officers, whereas they were only factors. They were thus put upon the footing of the obnoxious stamp officers. There will end for today. Make it a great day, and bye for now.